Star Trek vs. Star Wars: The Imperial War by Darius Trent. Chapter 10. The End. On board the damaged Executor, Darth Vader walked the corridors of the ship towards the debriefing room. The ship itself now lies hiding inside a region of space identified as the Paulson Nebula, with the remaining 5 star destroyers and 2 interdictors in formation around it. All ships were busy attempting repairs as the Executor lost its hyperdrive partway into the journey, forcing them to seek refuge until it was fully repaired. The fleet's current state was now thanks to the destruction of the Death Star, nearly killing the entire Joint Chiefs and taking the highest-ranking officer in the Imperial military, Grand Moff Wilhuth Tarkin, with it. Vader had it in mind to talk to a particular survivor of the battle, one he'd expected to perish alongside Tarkin. As he walked into the debriefing room, he saw the face of this person, Admiral Conan Antonio Miti, the chief of the Imperial Navy and the mysterious sole survivor of the Death Star's destruction in the Battle of Saul. The Admiral, who had previously been milling around while sitting at the table, suddenly stiffened up in full salute as the Sith Lord walked into the room. "My lord," he respectfully greeted with a hint of fear in his voice. "Take a seat, Admiral," commanded Vader with his usual baritone voice. Miti fumbled around for a few seconds before taking a seat at the table, Vader standing in front of him. "Tell me what happened on the Death Star, Admiral." "We were in the midst of preparing to fire the super laser when the USS Discovery suddenly appeared in our reactor core," he started. "It then dropped what appeared to be large-scale bombs inside the reactor containment area before disappearing shortly before they went off. I overheard the news through station-wide comms." "And tell me, why were you the only survivor?" asked Vader. "Everyone else was too busy attempting to figure out what was happening to escape," was Mati's response. "I was luckily close enough to the escape pod region for me to get out before the whole thing was blown to the kingdom come." "But tell me, why did you not choose to die then and there?" prodded Vader, his voice changing to an even sinister tone. "Surely such an advocate of the Death Star like you would wish to perish alongside it." "With all due respect, my lord," he began to explain, "while I was a major advocate for the Tarkin doctrine, I had my limits where Tarkin did not. To add to that, would you prefer one member of the Joint Chiefs still alive until all of them die?" Vader attempted to probe Mati's mind, attempting to see some sort of truth behind the man's lies. But the further he went, the harder it seemed to see into his mind. Even when he did manage to break through, there was seemingly nothing there of any interest, almost too much. While Vader had some doubts, he had to agree with the lowly human. "Why have no survivors of the Death Star when you can have one?" "It seems I owe you an apology, Admiral," remarked Vader, breaking the silence between the two men. "I was conspicuous of your survival being merely out of instinct, but you have shown me that you left the Death Star with good intentions. We will need strong people like you in the future to help rebuild our presence in this universe." "Yes, my lord," replied Miti as he once again saluted Vader. "I will not fail you." "You'd better not," was all Vader said as he walked out of the room, leaving Miti alone in the dark. As Vader walked out of the room, he looked back on Miti, who had gone back to relaxing at the table. In his mind, one thing was certain: he would be keeping a distant but careful eye on Miti in future. Inside Utopia Planitia 1, an officers' gathering was being held inside the club room of the Space Dock type station in orbit of Mars. Inside, gentle piano music could be held in the background as fellow captains and officers were all in gathering. Outside, ships sat in orbital drydocks as people mingled around inside the starbase. By the wall next to the row of windows, a temporary plaque was hung up with the names of the starships which were unfortunately destroyed in the prior battle. Images were also flashing up on the walls of each starship, ranging from small Miranda classes to Galaxy-class ships. Several people mingled around these, looking at the casualties and giving condolences to those closest to the people killed. Next to the bar, Captain Riker and his wife, Commander Troy, were talking to Captain Saru about prior events. "That was some expert piloting from Commander Stamets, Captain Saru," commented Riker as he took a sip from his synthahol beer. "It was mostly Zora that did the planning, Captain," replied Saru. "All Stamets had to do was put the ship where he had to." "I understand your ship is in for a full refit," asked Troy. "The Discovery will be undergoing a more permanent weapons upgrade in the near future, in order to increase its torpedo and phaser capability," answered Saru. "We'll most likely be off the front lines for a few months." "Well, when you do come back, I think you'll be there just in time for when we begin invading their territory," replied Riker. "I still wonder why they classified the Discovery and the Spore Drive." Meanwhile, Admiral Picard was busy talking to Scotty over a case of Aldebaran whiskey. "And so I understand you're reactivating your commission, Mr. Scott?" asked Picard. I am," replied Scott as he sculled his glass. "I spent too long out doing nothing. You getting me to assist Discovery was all I needed to get me going again." "Well, I think you'll be delighted to know I'm assigning you as Chief Engineer of the Discovery," informed Picard. "You'll be presiding over the refit the ship is about to get." "Thank ye, Admiral." "Thanks, Scott. There's a load of changes I want to make to that ship." "I also hear the refit might be several months," remarked Picard. "Can you do something about that?" "Oh, don't worry, Admiral. It won't be that long before you see Discovery back out there fighting those daft Imperials." While this all happened, Captain Trent stood by the window, looking out into space. Out the window, the USS Arizona sat still in space, temporarily encased in the spider-like shape of the orbital drydock it now sat in. He stood in awe as he thought back to the previous few years. Going from a small-time lecturer at Starfleet Academy to being one of only a couple dozen to command a starship in their 30s was an extraordinary feat, although he was having doubts about himself as he stared out at his ship. "Is there something wrong, sir?" asked Aldrin as she walked in on Trent behind him, momentarily startling him. "Oh, nothing, just thinking," replied Trent, turning back to face her. "I thought you were talking to Ensign Organa?" "Oh, she had to go help one of her mechs with the next probe we'll be sending through the anomaly," answered Aldrin. "What were you thinking about?" "Oh, just thinking about how frail mortality is and why we play around with it so often," Trent answered as he accompanied Aldrin to a nearby table by a different window. "Every time we end up in a battle, I keep on thinking my life is nearing its end." "Oh, come on, it happens to everyone," remarked Aldrin. "During the last one, that thought kept on growing," added Trent. "I know it's irrational and I should ignore it, but still it possesses me." "You know what, why don't we go to the bar for a couple rounds with Captain Mercer?" proposed Aldrin. "That could get it off your mind." "Yeah, why not?" sarcastically replied Trent. "After all, we've got to head out tomorrow and the ship still needs some repairs done." Aldrin and Trent chucked before the former replied with, "Don't worry, it's just synthahol. You'll be fine." The two of them smiled as they walked away to the bar, away from the window as the emptiness of space persisted, leaving no sound to pass through as activity bustled around outside the station, with starships leaving and entering dry docks and others going to warp to fight the Imperial threat.